She came for a job, one interview, one chance. But the moment Anna stepped inside, she felt it. Something was wrong. The air was too still. The receptionist wouldn't meet her eyes. A faint, unfamiliar scent lingered, like expensive cologne masking something off. A chill ran down her spine, warning her to leave. But curiosity, it held her still. The CEO leaned back, amusement flickering in his dark eyes. Then, click, the door locked. A slow smirk, a deliberate pause, his voice smooth as silk yet laced with danger. "You just sealed your fate, sweetheart. Hope you're ready to play." Anna's breath hitched. Every instinct screamed run. But something deeper, darker, whispered, "Stay." Because if she left now, she might never learn the truth. She never meant to walk into the wrong office. Olivia had spent the morning rehearsing her lines, clutching her neatly printed resume, determined to land a job that could help her pay off her mother's hospital bills. But fate had other plans. One wrong turn, one mistaken door, and she found herself standing in front of the last man she ever wanted to see again. Ethan Sterling, the ruthless CEO, the man who once held her heart and shattered it without a second thought. 3 years had passed since that stormy night when he let her walk away, his cold words slicing through her like a blade. "Love has no place in my world." She had wiped her tears, promised herself she'd never look back, and built a life far away from the pain he inflicted. But now here he was, sitting behind his massive oak desk, eyes dark with something unreadable. "Olivia?" His deep voice sent an unwanted shiver down her spine. She swallowed hard. I think I made a mistake. I was looking for—" "I know," he interrupted smoothly, standing up. He was taller than she remembered, more imposing, as if time had only sharpened the edges of the man he had become. "But now that you're here..." He walked toward the door. With a quiet click, he locked it. "Let's talk." Olivia's pulse spiked. She wasn't prepared for this. Not for him. She squared her shoulders, refusing to let him see her waver. "There's nothing to talk about." His gaze flickered, scanning her face as if searching for something. "You're still as stubborn as ever." "And you're still as arrogant as ever," she shot back. A ghost of a smirk played on his lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You're looking for a job, aren't you?" Olivia's fingers tightened around her resume. "That's none of your business." "Except it is," he said, stepping closer, "because I have a proposition for you." She clenched her jaw, every muscle in her body screaming at her to walk away. But something in his voice, something almost desperate, made her hesitate. Ethan Sterling was powerful, untouchable. He had built an empire, surrounded himself with wealth and influence. Yet standing here now, he looked different. There was something in his expression she couldn't quite place. Regret, longing, number. She couldn't allow herself to fall for illusions again. "Whatever it is," she said, her voice steady, "I'm not interested." But as she turned to leave, his next words stopped her cold. "It's about your mother." Her breath hitched. She spun around. "What did you say?" Ethan's jaw tightened, his hands sliding into his pockets. "I know she's sick. I know you've been struggling to pay for her treatment." He took a slow step forward. "Let me help." Olivia's mind whirled. How did he know? Why did he care? She hated him, or at least she wanted to. But deep down, where old scars refused to fade, she knew the truth. Once, Ethan Sterling had been the only man she ever loved. And now, he was offering her something she couldn't afford to refuse. But at what cost? The first time Ethan Sterling saw Olivia Bennett, she wasn't dressed in elegance or trying to impress anyone. She was standing in the rain, arms wrapped around a stray kitten, shielding it from the storm. He had been on his way out of his office, frustrated after a long day, when he spotted her near the building's entrance. Her clothes were soaked, her hair clung to her face, and yet she was smiling, softly, gently, at the trembling creature in her arms. She hadn't noticed him then. She was too busy whispering to the kitten, her voice full of warmth and care. Something about that moment stuck with him. It wasn't love at first sight. It was something quieter, something that made him pause. Later, he would tell himself that was the moment she started ruining him. Their worlds were never meant to collide. Ethan was a man consumed by ambition, by the cold steel of success. Olivia was everything he wasn't: soft, kind, endlessly hopeful. She didn't fit into his world, and yet somehow she became the one thing that made him feel human. Their romance hadn't been dramatic at first. It was built in stolen moments, the way she laughed when he made a rare joke, the way she challenged him when others only obeyed. She didn't fear him like the rest of the world, and maybe that's why he let himself fall. He had never been the kind of man to hold hands in public, but with Olivia, he found himself reaching for her without thinking. He had never been one for words, but with her, he wanted to say everything. She made him want things he had long convinced himself he didn't need. But love has a way of exposing the cracks we try to hide. Ethan had spent his life proving that emotions were a weakness, that attachments only led to destruction. And when he finally let Olivia in, it terrified him. He had been raised to believe that love made men like him reckless, vulnerable. So, when his father called him into his office one evening, he already knew what was coming. "You need to end it." Ethan clenched his fists. "This isn't your decision." His father leaned back in his chair, cold and calculating. "You think I don't know what's happening? You're distracted. She is a liability. If you want to lead this company, you need to act like it." Ethan wanted to fight. For the first time in his life, he wanted to ignore every rule, every expectation. But his father wasn't done. "Do you really think she'll stay once she realizes what you are?" His father's voice was smooth, sharp. "You may play at being normal, but you aren't. Sooner or later, she'll see the side of you no one else does. And when she does, she will leave." The words lodged themselves deep in Ethan's chest, because part of him believed them. He wasn't a good man. And Olivia? She deserved someone good. The night he ended it, he didn't give her a chance to fight. He was cold, brutal. He said things designed to make her walk away. "I don't love you." She had stared at him, disbelieving. "Ethan, don't do this." His expression hadn't wavered. "You were just a distraction. It's over." He would never forget the way she looked at him in that moment, like he had broken something sacred, like he had become everything she had never wanted to believe about him. She left that night, and Ethan had told himself it was for the best, that she would move on. But he never did. Years passed. He told himself he had made the right choice, until she walked through that office door today, reminding him of everything he tried to bury. And now, fate had brought her back. But this time, he wasn't sure he had the strength to let her go again. Olivia's hands trembled as she clutched her resume, her mind racing with Ethan's words. "It's about your mother." She had spent years trying to forget him, convincing herself that the cold, ruthless CEO she had once loved was nothing more than a painful memory. But now, here he was, offering to help, dangling a solution to her deepest fears. She shouldn't have stayed. She should have walked out the moment she saw him. But something in his eyes, something unspoken, kept her rooted in place. Her voice was tight. "What do you mean?" Ethan exhaled slowly, his fingers drumming against his desk. "I know about the hospital bills, Olivia. I know you've been struggling to keep up." His gaze darkened, unreadable. "And I can help." Olivia's chest tightened. "Why would you?" He hesitated, just for a second. Then his mask slipped back into place. "Because I can." Her nails dug into her palm. That was Ethan, always so sure, so in control. But she wasn't the same girl who had once believed he was unbreakable. She had seen him at his most vulnerable. She knew there were cracks beneath the surface, cracks he refused to acknowledge. And yet, here he was, offering her a lifeline. Olivia wanted to scream, to ask him why. Why now, after all this time? But she already knew the answer. He wasn't doing this because he cared. He was doing it because it was in his nature to control everything, to fix things without emotion. She lifted her chin. "I don't need your charity." Something flickered in his expression, gone too quickly to read. "It's not charity, it's an offer." Her stomach twisted. "What kind of offer?" He leaned back, his gaze locked onto hers. "Work for me, 3 months. No contracts, no obligations after that. I pay your mother's medical bills in full." Silence stretched between them. 3 months. That was all. And her mother would get the care she desperately needed. It was a simple deal, a logical one, but Olivia knew better. Nothing with Ethan was ever simple. Her pulse pounded. "You expect me to believe this is just business?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he studied her, his expression unreadable. Does it matter? It shouldn't. The practical choice was clear, but her heart knew better. Being near him again would reopen wounds she had spent years trying to heal. Ethan watched her carefully, his own mind a battlefield. He hadn't planned this. He had thought he buried the past, locked it away where it couldn't touch him. But the moment Olivia walked through that door, something inside him cracked. She looked different, stronger, more guarded, but she was still Olivia, still the woman who once made him feel something he had no right to feel. And now, faced with the reality of losing her again, he did the only thing he knew how to do. He took control. His voice was calm, calculated. "I need someone I can trust in my company. You need the money. It's a fair trade." Lies. The truth was, he just wanted her close, just for a little while. But Olivia wasn't blind. She saw the way his fingers tensed against the desk, the way his breathing had subtly changed when she stepped closer. She should say no. She should walk away and never look back. But then she thought of her mother, hooked up to machines, waiting for another round of treatment that Olivia couldn't afford. 3 months, that was all. And yet, as she looked into Ethan's stormy eyes, she knew one thing with certainty. If she agreed to this, she might not survive it. The room felt suffocating, the air thick with tension. Ethan's offer hung between them, a fragile thread waiting to snap. Olivia's heart pounded in her chest, each beat a painful reminder of what she stood to lose or gain. 3 months, that was all. A simple trade. The words echoed in her mind over and over, but they didn't make the decision any easier. She looked at Ethan, his figure a shadow against the late afternoon light pouring through the tall windows. He hadn't moved, hadn't spoken since offering her the deal, but she could feel the weight of his gaze on her, as if he was waiting for something, anything, that might break the silence. But Olivia didn't know what to say. Her emotions were tangled, caught in a whirlwind of anger, fear, and longing. She hated him. She hated the way he could walk into her life and undo everything she'd worked so hard to build. But she also hated how much she still needed him, how much she still cared. Her fingers gripped the edge of the desk as she spoke, her voice trembling despite her efforts to stay composed. "You think I can just accept your offer? After everything?" Ethan's eyes darkened, his jaw tightening as if he was bracing for the storm she was about to unleash. "I didn't come here to beg you, Ethan," she continued, her voice stronger now. "I came because I don't have a choice. My mother needs treatment, and you're the only person who can help. But I won't be your pawn. I won't be the woman who falls for your games again." For a moment, he was silent, as if her words had hit him harder than any physical blow. His eyes softened, just for a second, and Olivia could have sworn she saw a flicker of regret in his gaze. But it was gone before she could fully understand it. "I'm not playing games, Olivia." His voice was rough, almost like he was speaking through gritted teeth. "This isn't about control. This is about giving you a chance to take care of your mother, to fix what's broken." "Fix what's broken?" She laughed bitterly, the sound cold and sharp. "You think you can fix everything with money, don't you?" Ethan took a step forward, his face inches from hers. "Number? But I can't fix this unless you let me in." Her breath caught in her throat. He didn't say the words she was desperate to hear. He didn't say he was sorry. He didn't say he regretted letting her walk away. But in that moment, the rawness in his voice, the vulnerability he never allowed anyone to see, shattered the walls she had carefully built around her heart. And yet, as much as she wanted to believe him, as much as her heart screamed for a second chance, there was a part of her that was terrified. Terrified of falling back into the same trap. Terrified of giving him power over her again. She took a step back, her chest tightening. "I can't do this again, Ethan." His expression faltered, his shoulders tensing as if he was preparing for her rejection. But this time, he didn't back down. "You're right," he said quietly, his voice raw. "I was the one who walked away. I was the one who pushed you out of my life. But I never stopped thinking about you. Not once." Her heart skipped a beat at the rawness of his confession. His eyes locked with hers, and for the first time in years, she saw the man who had once loved her, the man who had torn her apart. Olivia's chest burned with the weight of everything they had been, and everything they could never be. "I loved you, Olivia," he said, his voice almost breaking, "and I'm sorry for everything I did. But if you walk out of here now," he took a deep breath, as if gathering the courage to face what he was about to say, "I'll lose you forever." The words hung in the air like a threat, and in that moment, Olivia was caught between the past and the future, between the woman who had once believed in him and the one who had learned to survive without him. Her eyes searched his face, looking for some sign that he was telling the truth. Something, anything, that would convince her that this time, things would be different. But she couldn't see it. For a moment, time seemed to stretch, and all she could hear was the pounding of her own heart. Then, in a voice so quiet it was barely a whisper, she asked the question she'd been avoiding. "Do you still love me?" Ethan's eyes flickered, his lips parting as if he wanted to say something. But no words came. He stepped back, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "Olivia," but she was already turning toward the door. "I don't believe you anymore," she said, her voice steady despite the pain. "And I can't do this. I won't be your second choice, your afterthought." She opened the door, the weight of her decision settling heavy in her chest. Behind her, Ethan stood in silence, his expression unreadable. But she knew. She knew without a doubt that walking away meant something more than just leaving him. It meant letting go of everything she had once wanted. And that, she realized, was the hardest part of all. Olivia's footsteps echoed through the hallway, each step heavier than the last, as if she were carrying the weight of her past, of everything she'd just walked away from. Her heart, once so full of hope, now felt heavy with doubt. She wasn't sure if she was doing the right thing, if she was making the right choice. She reached the elevator, her hand hovering over the button. The building felt so cold, so impersonal. Everything about it reminded her of Ethan, the cold, sharp edges of his world that she could never quite fit into. Her finger pressed down. As the doors slid open, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She hesitated, then pulled it out, almost afraid of what she might see. One missed call. Ethan. Her chest tightened. The sight of his name on the screen sent a wave of conflicting emotions crashing through her. A part of her wanted to pick up, to hear his voice one more time, to see if there was still something left between them. But another part, the stronger part, knew that if she did, she would never be able to walk away. She pressed the button to the ground floor and let the phone slip back into her pocket. As the elevator descended, her mind raced. Maybe she was running. Maybe she wasn't ready to face him. But as the doors opened and she stepped into the empty lobby, something inside her shifted. She couldn't ignore the fact that the pain of letting go, of saying goodbye to the man who had once been everything to her, was almost unbearable. And yet, there was relief too. She'd made her choice. It wasn't easy, and it didn't feel like victory, but she knew it was what she needed. She couldn't keep chasing a love that had already slipped through her fingers. As she pushed open the building's glass doors, the cool air hit her face, and she breathed it in deeply. It wasn't freedom, but it was something. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw a familiar figure, tall, broad-shouldered, standing by the curb with his hands in his pockets. Her heart stuttered, the lump in her throat growing. Ethan. He was waiting for her. The sight of him there, just standing, watching her as if he were unsure of what to do next, made her pause. She wanted to turn and walk away, pretend she didn't see him, but she couldn't. She didn't want to keep running. So she approached him, her steps tentative, cautious. He didn't speak right away. He didn't say anything at all, just watched her with those same stormy eyes, as if searching for something, anything, that would give him hope. For a moment, neither of them moved. The world felt too still, too silent. Then he spoke. His voice was quieter than usual, rougher, like it had been worn down by too many unspoken words. Olivia. Her name was a soft whisper in the wind. She looked at him, her heart in her throat. You shouldn't have waited for me. I know. He took a step forward, then another. He didn't reach for her, didn't try to touch her, but his eyes said everything she needed to hear. I know I don't deserve you, but I'm not ready to let you go. The words hit her harder than she expected, and for a split second, the old feelings, the ones she'd buried so deep, rushed to the surface. The love, the hurt, the hope. But she steadied herself. She had made her choice. She wasn't going to fall for him again, not like this. I can't be the person you want me to be, Ethan, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I can't be that girl again. He nodded slowly, as if he understood. But his eyes, those eyes, still held something she couldn't quite name, something between hope and surrender. I never asked you to be, he said softly, but I can't let you go without knowing you'll be okay, without knowing you're happy. His words felt like a dagger to her chest. She wanted to believe him, to let herself believe that he had changed, that he was capable of loving her the way she had always wanted. But deep down, she knew better. This wasn't just about love anymore. This was about letting go of him, of the past, and of the dreams she had once built with him. I'll be okay, she said, forcing a smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. And with that, he stepped back, giving her the space she needed. He wasn't ready to let go. Not yet. But maybe, just maybe, she could finally walk away. Olivia turned, her heart aching with the truth she had always known. They had never been the right fit, but that didn't mean their story was over. It just meant it had to change. As she walked away, she couldn't help but glance back. Ethan was still standing there, watching her, his figure a silhouette in the fading light. And for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like she was running anymore. She was walking toward something new, toward her future. And no matter what it held, she was ready to face it. Because sometimes, letting go was the only way to move forward. Love isn't always about finding the perfect person. Sometimes it's about finding the strength to walk away, even when your heart is torn in two. Is love truly stronger than pride? Can two people, broken by time and circumstance, ever find their way back? Or does love, when left unchecked, become just another memory? What would you do if love knocked at your door one last time? Would you answer it, or would you let it go? Maybe love isn't meant to be a perfect story. Maybe it's about the courage to face what you've lost and what you're willing to fight for. After all, sometimes the hardest part is knowing when to hold on and when to let go.